This is two shy guys a mile high, and we're gonna run it like through.
Certified on the track.
And my brother probably just did it more out of spite. Just like, not for me, kind of thing. But just after FAMU, after graduating, I graduated and I actually stayed kind of in Tallahassee because opportunities, of course, just opening up people I'd worked with. I'd always kind of worked like an after school and different grant programs that supported kids in the education field while I was attending school.
Nice. That's what I was going to ask you. What was your first big opportunity after graduation and getting into the field?
My first opportunity was actually, I started my career being a paraeducator. Okay. So that was before you get your teaching certificate, before I got officially passed. And it was at a school that I actually have been working in. We had something called the Howard Hughes Science Program. So it's, of course, exposing kids of color to science, engineering, all those type of things. And I was already working in the school, right? So the principal at the time already knew me, was kind of like, knew that I was had my degree. And really, she opened that door for me and was like, hey, I have a paraeducator position. Once you get your certificate, we'll love to have you here. You already have relationships built with the kids, all that great stuff.
For those that don't know, what is a paraeducator? Just for the listeners.
A paraeducator, we call the title has changed so much. It used to be called a teacher's aide. Okay. So pretty much you're usually a non-degree, you're a person that doesn't have a degree of some type, and you are there as a support, a teacher support, whether it's a one-on-one with a student or in a classroom as a support. So you're there to help the teacher, help a student, pull groups. People use paraeducators in all different types of ways within the school.
Cool.
Yeah. So you're graduated, you got all this knowledge from college, and now you're in your field and working. What did you notice from the things that you learned versus applying it to the actual job? How did that go?
I felt like I was drowning.
Help me!
My first probably like two or 3 years. It was hard. It was hard in the aspect, I just don't want to say it's hard. It's hard in the aspect because you're trying to apply what you've learned, especially being fresh out of school, and then having people that have been in the career field for so long trying to tell you something different.
The practical OJT.
Yeah, so you're like,
way of doing things.
They're like, you're doing that. That's the hard way, or you don't have to do all of that. And so you're kind of in this place of like, of course I want to heed and listen to this advice because you've been teaching for way longer than I, right. But at the same time too, I'm thinking about, my problems of practice and things that I've learned at my school. Like, I want to incorporate this. I have a vision for what I want my classroom to be like in our environment and learning community. So it was hard, but I always tell people as a teacher, at least in the elementary field, you're not alone. You always have a team, quote unquote, whether it's a partner, one other person, or a couple of teachers. And I had an amazing team. My team helped me get through my first 2 years of teaching. My first year I taught fourth grade, and I taught fourth grade for 2 years right out the bat. My first year was a 4-5 combo, which was, I was already nervous because I'm like, how am I going to teach fourth and fifth grade at the same time?
Future. At the same time, teaching fourth, teaching fifth, at the same damn time. Sit down, do your work at the same damn time. Get it together at the same damn time.
I'm happy that inspired you.
It does. Yo,
yeah, having those amazing women that were just there to be like, hey, you got this. And I feel like they saw my potential at that time and just ran with that, stood up for me in the sense of, hey, she's capable, she can do this. We have no doubt about it. And I feel like that shaped me because I had a great team. And in my career, as I've continued to teach, I've been on many teams. I've taught, I was actually just thinking about this. I have taught in 4 different districts at 4 different districts in 2 states at 4 different schools.
Okay.
So,
And as a teacher of a year.
and I was teacher. Thank you, baby. Shameless plug. I'm really proud of that. Yes, and I was teacher of the year.
You're all proud.
Also, but doing all of that, I've got to see a lot of different things. Right? Every district is different. Every school is different within that, and how administration is run, and the type of climate and culture that's amongst those teachers, as well as where your school's located. Something else about me is I've always taught at what we call a Title I school. So a Title I school is a school that is pretty much receiving from the state extra supports. They're getting extra money and funds pushed into the school, whether it's for more coaches, more interventionists, more being able to provide after school for free, you know. So it's like there's certain requirements. It has to be, so of course you're in a low economic area. There has to be so many kids that are receiving free and reduced lunch. You know, there's a formula that these schools are this way, but I've always worked at a Title I school, and it's always been my choice. I like the children there. I guess I feel like they need me the most, if that makes sense. Someone's going to need you.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
How much of, you say you have your vision, how much of your vision are you able to incorporate in your like syllabus and your teachings as far as that, as opposed to what they require you to teach and go about teaching the kids?
Good question.
And I'm sure it changes throughout the years.
Oh yeah. I feel
schools.
like I didn't get to that point where I felt comfortable, because you're always afraid that if you defer from the assigned curriculum that the kids are going to miss something on the test, because you know we have these state tests. So you're very concerned, and I feel like not until I started teaching really later in my career, probably after that first, I'll be honest, maybe after that 4th year is when I really focused on the standard. If I have to teach you main idea, right, how to understand what this article is mostly about and provide evidence, I don't have to use this story or whatever story is provided. I don't have to use the 3 Little Pigs if I was teaching, 2nd grade, if I wanted you to retell. I can use anything. And I think that's where we get, as teachers, get kind of, boxed in, because we don't realize that it's just about the concept or the standard or skill that I'm trying to teach. So I try to now, even more so, but then that's why I try to incorporate other things. Like, one of my favorite books I would tell the kids, one of my favorite people I always say was Ruby Bridges as an educator. So my kids are like, Ruby Bridges? Who's Ruby Bridges? And I'm like, what? Like, certain things we also remember too. What you think kids know, they don't know.
Can you educate the audience about what
Ruby
Bridges is?
So Ruby Bridges is a little black girl that had the opportunity to go to an all-white school. Of course, this was during segregation where it was not allowed, but she was the pilot for this. She was the one. After things got dangerous, as we know, and during the civil rights, hosing, riots, all this crazy things was going on, she stood firm. After her whole class, because they did a pilot class, actually decided, all the parents pulled out, she was the one that remained and stayed and actually watched. So I feel it's all about overcoming, perseverance. We're resilient people.
Absolutely.
And I feel Ruby Bridges was that way back when. And so I always talk about her story, and I'm always like, she's great, right?
Paved the
And
way for a lot.
Right.
exactly. And even my kids now, I tell people, I'm like, if you didn't have people like Ruby Bridges, of course we always know MLK, if we didn't have these people, I was like, y'all guys being in the classroom right now sitting with each other, it wouldn't be possible.
Started the revolution.
Right. You wouldn't have that best friend that doesn't look like you sitting beside you, because you would be in the classroom, people look all just like you.
Yeah, that is so huge that you continuously are pushing, not necessarily the envelope, but pushing to do what your spirit is telling you to do. Because like literally, you can get boxed in with these standardized curriculums, which once again, we're not going to get on the curriculum piece, because that's a whole nother topic. Because what standards are they using and how are they standardizing that, right? We can get into that topic. That's a sticky topic. But just having somebody to want to do something creative, so the kids can not just be kind of narrowed focus. That's such a hard thing to do, because it's almost like literally going against that system, right?
Yep.
So how have you kept first of all, your sanity there, and how have you kept yourself, on that cutting edge of innovating, just so you have to teach these lessons, but your standards you're going to teach to a higher standard. That's just from what we've heard, right? You're not gonna.
Oh
just
yeah,
give
if you
us
ask
a
him,
minimum.
I'm a hard grader. I'm a
Right,
hard
yeah,
grader on myself.
She the toughest grader on this side of the Mississippi, boy.
I'm a hard
But
grader.
that's what Miss Freeman would have did, right?
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
exactly.
And of course, we all talk about the process. We all talk about the pressure, right? We all talk about the perseverance and what it takes, especially nowadays. Some of these kids don't even have that. So we need people like you to go out here and keep pushing our black youth, all our youth, right? To be able to go and say, listen, you can see my story, use it, go through all this stuff, because at the end of this, you stick to the script.
Right.
You keep pushing yourself. It's going to be tough. That's a guarantee. But on the end of that, it's going to be these things that you strive for.
I feel like after I got over, I guess, being scared, because that's what it is, right? Where I was scared to defer from what I've been taught. And I'm not going to say fam taught me that, but that expectation by education to be like, oh, we stick with this. These are the standards. Here's this curriculum and this is what you do. Or here's this book and I teach directly what this book says and goes through it. And then, like you said, we can talk about who made this book. Don't get me started on history books or lack thereof, right? So for me, it was knowing that, kind of thinking of my why.
Yep.
I got into this to help brown little girls and boys that look like me, right? So I guess I fell back, even though there was a fear of, oh gosh, am I setting them up by not sticking to this? All those other questions. I always went back to my why of, this is why I got into this, and I need to share what I know to best prepare them. So then that kind of just pushed me from there. I'm going to do what I know is best and do what's best for kids, and then apologize later if someone has a problem with what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
But also they teach us too, right? They want to say they're giving you autonomy in the classroom. So then I looked at it like, okay, you're saying that pretty much as long as these kids are growing, I'm making years growth, they're doing what they need to do, they're reaching these goals and expectations, and I can have data to prove that, there's not a problem. So then I was like, well, if you don't like what I'm doing, I'm gonna fall back on my data, right? Because if my kids are getting it, it doesn't matter how or by what means per se. If you're going to be picky about, oh, you chose this article, I decided to choose this article on Mary Walker. Okay, and for those of you guys who don't know, I was just talking to my kids about Mary Walker. She is actually was known as the oldest student in the nation. All right, she was a slave. She grew up. She did not learn to read until I believe she was 114.
Wow.
And she said she lived through 26 presidents. And it was just an amazing story. And it was a picture book. And I was like, see, information is out there, parents. This is a picture book, a nonfiction picture book that is depicting this Black woman telling her story, her struggles. And I read it, one, because it was nonfiction, and our kids at my school, especially right now, are having a hard time with nonfiction literature, informational text. And, we're talking about how we read nonfiction differently. But also in that one bam of a book, it was nonfiction. I taught you about a person you probably had no idea about that I learned about as well in the process. I'm teaching you history because it's talking about slavery. It talks about the Emancipation Proclamation. It gave them this whole full ride. Then we're talking about presidents. We're also talking about, oh, she's a learner. You're never too old to be a student, right? Or to learn something new. And she was struggling with reading and writing, the things that our kids are struggling with now. So I was like, her resilience, her ambition, right? All these things, she did it. She never gave up. She learned how to read, write, add, and subtract. And she was saying the only thing she had I think she got it when she was 8 or 9, was a Bible that an evangelist gave her. And she kept it. Even though she couldn't read it, she said it looked like squiggles to her. She kept it.
Wow.
She was like, I had 3 sons, and she said she always got someone to write their birth date in the Bible. And she said not till the Bible had to wait. They said the Bible had to wait 101 years for her to be able to read it.
Well,
so
no excuses.
Being able to make that choice for my kids and expose all kids to that, it's worth it. Even if somebody came by and be like, well, I think, like you said, goes to why. Well, why did you choose that book? For all the reasons I just explained to you guys is why I chose this book to teach the standard of comprehension and understanding nonfiction texts and the things that we see.
So how do you feel about, like, I've been seeing in the news about, like, you know, the southern states, and then going about not teaching kids about certain topics like slavery and stuff like that in schools now? How do you feel about that topic and them trying to take that out of the school in terms of learning about the history? What's your take on that?
We're setting our babies up for failure. We're setting ourselves up to repeat history, right? We said that's the reason why we have to learn it. In grad school, actually, I was learning what you don't teach or what we're taking out. They call it null curriculum. It's a curriculum. What we choose not to teach.
Just omitting it.
Yes, it's a choice. It's still hurting our kids in the wrong run. And once again, we look at who's making those decisions.
Right.
Why do we want to take this out now? Why is it a problem at this point in time that you feel that these things should not or do not need to be talked about when our outsides, our surroundings, the world is telling us different? People want to take out what Texas was talking about, taking critical race theory. Really? So we don't want our kids to think critically about race?
Right.
Like, just breaking down the title of that.
Two things.
I mean, thinking
that you
critically.
should be thinking about.
Right.
Critically thinking.
And that's the big push. We're like, we want our students, our scholars, to think critically in all subject matter. But it's still a skill. You have to teach how to think critically. It's not, most people don't naturally think critically and be able to apply all these different variables to the problem or the task at hand, right? So
You still got to go out there and live this life. So why not know about the history of this life?
Right.
exactly.
you
Both
got here.
sides. I mean, all sides of it. And that's what's been the thing. We talk about information gathering. We talked about research. You've heard a lot of commonality of, and I think that's what we all literally take away from it is, like, do your research. And you're trying to take away the very thing that people are probably researching more of now because they want to understand what's my history, right? We had an ancestry podcast. Like, I mean, that opens up a whole nother form of things, you know what I'm saying? And so I feel you on that. That is setting us up for failure there.
Yeah. Trying to sweep it under the rug.
And just gonna say, well, we're not gonna talk about
Washing
race
it away.
and things that happened in the past that this country was built on. I mean, that's like admitting the chapter in a book and saying, okay, here's your manual.
Right. No,
But you just
absolutely
admitted the chapter that actually built the manual.
right.
This manual was built on.
Or the legs, or the
backs
stand on,
off.
right? You're putting it together.
Trying to black out them government
Right.
documents.
Redacted. Redacted.
Straight up.
But in saying that, and I guess what Phil asking that question made me think about this, and especially in COVID, and a lot of that, I saw a lot more of the need for parent support.
Message.
Okay, in the schools I work at, there's always
Absolutely.
a need for parent support, right? But in that, with these things being taken out, omitted, even more important for our parents to be teaching at home. And I'm not just talking about, adding, subtracting. No, teaching your family history, your culture, your traditions, because traditions are just as important. Like, we have conversations about traditions all the time, and traditions doesn't necessarily mean Christmas. We open Christmas presents on Christmas Eve instead of Christmas Day. Traditions can be like, oh, hey, we eat dinner together every night.
Yes.
You know, we sit down at the table, phones off, TVs off. We are immersed in having a conversation and finding out, how was your day? What do you do? How are you feeling? Having those real conversations. And I feel like parents, I'm not personally a parent. Not yet. I'm not a parent, so I can't speak exactly to what it is. I even tell my parents of my scholars that I teach, like, I don't fully understand it, but know I only have your child's best at heart, always, right?
And you
So
there.
it's like that time, the gift of time is one thing you can always give, and I mean that quality time. And people are like, oh, I read with my kids every night, or we spend time, we do things together, and I'm like, oh, culture and experience with your kids, amazing. That gives them opportunities you won't believe. But also having that conversation and being like, we may have read a book together, or you may have read to me, vice versa. But are you asking critical questions? I'm always on my partner here about, you gotta ask the right questions. So if y'all just read together, are you taking the time to be like, well, what
What's
did
your
we
thoughts?
just read?
Exactly.
Right. How do you think about that? Or something happens on the news with everything that's in the news. Ask your kid, how do you feel about what you just saw? What do you think that means? That you will have probably some of the most deep and amazing conversations to truly understand how your child processes and thinks about things.
Absolutely.
You know, because I've had some parents like, oh, I feel like, you know, at school they connect so well with you and da 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 da. And I'm like, I spend more time with your child than you do.
Yep.
You
Yep.
challenge them and you
Right.
ask them questions and actually concerned
You know,
about it.
even when I
'Cause
tell my
kids can
kids
tell they're
that.
concerned.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
They can tell when you actually care or when you don't.
Yep.
And they
Yes.
give you that same type of energy.
And
Yep.
you're already on there.
Keep that
with
same
it.
energy.
Without even being a parent.
You're
yet.
right.
You're already on the key thing that we
thank
have
you.
seen. Like for real, that's what it's been. And you talk about schooling at home, like doing the things that you need to
Yes.
do to prepare your children
For life.
for life. It's just success outside of when your parents are gone.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because that's for me as a parent now. That's been my focus and my why, to make sure that we set our children up and all our children for success and being able to make sure that they can critically think about things, because we're not going to be around forever. You know, I wish I can say I can get to 150 something
Right.
years old and see 85 president. You know what I'm saying? I'm being
Right.
facetious, but
Yeah, right.
but I mean, we don't know how much time we have in us
Right.
like that, and so you know, thinking about things, doing our research, critically
Mm-hmm.
thinking, giving our kids, you know, the best opportunity. That's, as a teacher, the parents are the first teachers, right?
Yes,
You
absolutely.
know, and so it's very crucial. Like we're homeschooling our children. You know what I'm saying? We have to do that, especially in this day and age right now, because we want to make sure they're set up. We're going to do other things to teach them outside of that, but technically it's like, well, what are the schools doing right now? I mean, it's been on pause for a year and a half or so. Parenting ain't been on pause. Learning ain't been on pause. You know, we've been teaching them the best way we can.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I do agree with Phil, like, kids do have a power. It's magic. You're right. They can see through you. They know if you care. They know if you don't. So I don't ever try to play with kids in the sense of, if I care about, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to build a relationship. Ours may not be, we are best friends and you like me and I like you, but you're going to know my job is to keep you safe, teach you, and know that I care about you in the sense that nothing bad is going to happen with you while you with me. You know, kind of thing. And I feel like once kids know that that's you and this is how you feel, no matter what happens, no matter if you get on them, if you're riding them hard, if you're showing them love. I mean, right now in COVID, of course, we're not hugging nobody, but once they know that, they know even if I'm coming on you and I'm riding you, you know it's from a place of, guess what? She wants the best for me. I'm gonna be great, because I always tell them, like, you can't do the minimum and expect to be great.
Yeah, for real.
You know, you can't do the minimum and expect to be great. And usually I always go to my favorite people like Kobe,
Hey, the
the
Black
Mamba
Mamba.
mentality.
gotta
Yes.
have Kobe.
You know what I mean? I talk about LeBron. I talk about a lot of different athletes because I'm like, once again, in relation to my kids, you know, my black boys, hey, y'all like, everybody's like, who's your favorite? Oh, you know, Durant, all these people. I was like, okay. I'm like, I'm going to speak Kobe. I was like, we practice, right? We practice to get better at things. You know, this is what I tell my kids. I'm like, Kobe, he gets up early, right? He's there before the team gets there, warmed up. Then he works out with the team. I was like, after practice is over, I was like, it's over? We practice, it's done? And they're like, yeah, we already practiced. We good. And I was like, no. I'm like, Kobe stays after. He practices some more. I was like, you have to do more than the minimum be great. So if this is my expectation for you and what I need you to do and or learn, it's great, because I'm going to set you up to reach mine. But think about if you did just a little bit more. Not every time. It may be every couple of times. But think about how you will blow my expectation and your own out the water if you do more than the minimum.
Man, just imagine if this country was doing more than the minimum. You know, imagine if we just, no, but that's real talk though. It's not even, it's you related it so simply, but yet it's such a hard thing to do, a hard concept. And even me, even y'all, I know we don't, sometimes we get there and we like, you know, and it takes a team. It takes support. Like you said multiple times.
Yes, a team.
I had a good team. You know what I'm saying? Like, we a team right here. Like, I can't sit here and say we ain't gonna go through stuff, but we together as a team, bro. Like, for real. We don't came through so much stuff, and I know I can support my folks. You know what I'm saying? I know I can support my family. Something go wrong, guess what? Boom. I got support. And that's what it is. Then you can operate on a different level with that type of confidence, right? You can go like, all right,
you got that team.
You got that team, man.
Hey, I feel you, Coach Howard. I had another question for you, Queen. What is the biggest thing that you have noticed about children and their learning over the times that you've been in the profession and now through COVID as well, too? Like, what is the biggest thing?
The struggle with reading. Okay, I'm gonna pick that content. Reading has always been something that has been a struggle, or kids have always been behind, but now it has been magnified and triple quantified after COVID. So our kids were out of school, or out of the schoolhouse, right? The brick and mortar building, for the last year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay, so your typical child that, you may be like, oh, they're a year behind. Now, adding that year and a half, what you got? You got them really, they're already 2.5, really 3 years behind. I was telling us in our data, we use a program called iReady. This year, they didn't invent a new color for the kids that were below. Usually it was green, yellow, red. Green, you're on. Yellow, you're a bubble kid. You may be, a little bit behind. Red, you're probably a year to 2 behind. Now there's like red with some stripes across it, like a maroon color for our kids that are 3+ years behind in school. So I have 3rd graders that may be on a 1st grade / kindergarten, because you really can't be lower than, there's no quantification for anything more than 3 years if you're in 3rd grader. I have a 3rd grader that can't read, or better yet, doesn't know can't identify all their letters and or letter sounds. Now, another thing I heard a lot during COVID was, oh, that's the teacher's job. It's the teacher's job to teach. Get it, fam, I get it, because everybody's like, oh, this new math, this new reading, Common Core came and changed a lot of things for a lot of families. This new way of thinking about math was a struggle. Parents felt like they couldn't support their kids in learning that. There ain't no excuse for not knowing your letters. Mom, Dad, even if you weren't fully educated, even if you didn't go all through high school, your children, you should be able to talk about our letters and then be able to identify it. And you should be able to come into kindergarten knowing the letters in your name, right? You've had that since you were born.
Yeah.
So it's just parents doing what they can. And I feel like right now in this education, there's a lot of finger pointing. We want to blame, kids are behind because of COVID. Kids were already behind. This is not new. Kids were behind before COVID. But guess what? We also aren't hearing enough information about those kids that thrived in COVID, right? Those kids that we know didn't like school, socially awkward, didn't have friends, introverts. So for those kids, they excelled. They flourished during this time of being in this platform of online, right? So we're not hearing about the good that it may have hurt, because we know it dramatically hurted the majority. But for some people, it works better.
Tune in on the next episode of 2CGMH to find out.